There are things that do not enter your life with noise. They arrive slowly, settle into your days, change the way you think, steal your peace, and when you finally notice, they are already living inside you as if they had always belonged there. And the most curious part is that it is almost never the great tragedies that pull us away from ourselves. Most of the time, it is small habits, small attachments, small permissions we give to what weakens us. A thought that comes back every night, an expectation you secretly keep feeding, a constant need to be seen, understood, recognized, a fear disguised as caution, a relationship that has already ended on the inside, but still takes up space on the outside. All of it begins to pile up, and what once seemed small becomes a kind of invisible prison. Stoicism always understood this with striking clarity. The great Stoic thinkers did not speak only about enduring the storms of life. Above all, they spoke about clearing the inside, about removing from the soul whatever makes it heavy, about realizing that freedom does not begin when the world finally gets organized on the outside, but when you stop carrying what should have been left behind long ago. Marcus Aurelius did not write to impress anyone. He wrote so he would not lose himself. Seneca did not reflect on life to sound wise. He reflected because he understood that if a person does not watch what he allows into his mind, he ends up serving what he was supposed to govern. And Epictetus may have said it most directly of all. It is not what happens to you that destroys you, but the meaning you give to what happens. That is why certain things must be removed in silence. Not to create an image of strength. Not to prove anything to anyone. Not to come back looking better, more admirable, more enviable. None of that, but because there comes a moment when a human being must reconcile with his own dignity. There comes a moment when you need to look at your life and honestly admit that there are burdens you are still carrying not because you need to, but because you got used to them. And habit, when it is not examined, becomes destiny. Maybe you are living exactly that right now. Maybe you are tired, but you cannot explain where that tiredness comes from. Maybe it is not work. Maybe it is not lack of time. Maybe it is not even one major concrete problem. Maybe what is exhausting you is the sum of silent things draining your energy day after day. The expectation of pleasing everyone, constant comparison, buried resentment, too much weight given to other people's opinions, the urge to answer everything, attachment to what is already over, the attempt to control what does not belong to you. All of that consumes you. All of that weighs on you. All of that steals your presence. And modern life only makes this worse because it teaches you to accumulate. Accumulate contacts, commitments, distractions, responses, explanations, images, versions of yourself. You keep filling up with noise until you no longer know where the world ends and your own conscience begins. Then silence starts to feel uncomfortable. A pause starts to feel threatening. Solitude starts to feel like abandonment. And that is where many people lose themselves, because they run from the very place where healing begins. The Stoic did not run from silence. He returned to it, not because silence magically solved everything, but because in silence the truth becomes harder to hide. If you want to recover your strength, your clarity, and your peace, maybe the path is not to add more things to your routine. Maybe the path is to remove. Maybe true transformation is not found in gaining more, but in letting go better. And letting go better takes courage, because many people know how to acquire, but very few know how to release. Very few know how to cut away the excess. Very few know how to leave without making an announcement. Very few know how to step back without turning it into a performance. But that is exactly where one of the highest forms of maturity lives, when you understand that not every change needs to be explained in order to be real. The Stoics never confused serenity with passivity. For them, serenity was mastery. It was the ability not to become a slave to impulse, vanity, neediness, or fear. And that mastery begins with a very simple, yet deeply uncomfortable question. What in your life should have already been removed? What still takes up space inside you even while it hurts you? What do you keep feeding because you got used to it, because you fear the emptiness, because you cannot bear the idea of disappointing people, because you still hope something will change without requiring you to make a decision? Today, that is exactly the invitation, to look inward with honesty and notice the things you need to quietly erase from your life. Not with anger, not with theatrics, not with a desire for revenge, but with awareness, with firmness, with the peace of someone who has understood that protecting your own soul is also a responsibility. And maybe, as you listen, you will realize that some of these things no longer belong in the person you are becoming. The first of them is the need for approval. Maybe nothing weakens a human being more than living according to the gaze of others. And this does not always show up in obvious ways. Sometimes it is not an open hunger for praise. Sometimes it is subtler than that. It is the anxiety of wanting to be understood by everyone. It is the discomfort you feel when someone does not recognize your worth. It is the need to justify your decisions. It is that urge to over-explain why you stepped away, why you changed, why you matured, why you chose a path that not everyone approves of. Whoever lives this way places the center of life in the hands of an audience. And a life guided by an audience never finds peace. Epictetus taught that when you try to control the image others have of you, you have already begun to lose your freedom. Because other people's opinions do not belong to you. They shift, they waver, they get contaminated, they get distracted. Today someone praises you, tomorrow they forget you. Today they admire you, tomorrow they criticize you. To build your peace on that is to build your house on sand. The Stoic learned to ask, am I doing what is right, or am I doing what will be best received? That question separates the strong from the dependent. Quietly eliminating the need for approval means no longer begging for emotional validation. It means doing what needs to be done even without applause. It means enduring the discomfort of not being understood by everyone. And that hurts because there is an immature part inside almost everyone that wants constant reassurance. It wants to hear that it is right. It wants to be sure no one will be disappointed. But maturity is not the ability to please everyone. Maturity is the ability to remain whole even when not everyone approves of your path. Another thing that needs to go is the habit of entering useless arguments. And here there is a subtle trap, because many people mistake debate for strength. They mistake response for intelligence. They mistake winning a conversation for preserving their dignity. But the wise person does not measure strength by the number of conflicts he enters. He measures it by the number of conflicts he is able to walk away from without losing his peace. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that people act according to what they know, what they fear, and what they desire. Not every mind is ready for truth. Not every heart is available for reason. There are people who do not want to understand. They want to win. There are people who do not want dialogue. They want emotional release. There are people who provoke you not because they have something important to say, but because they need to drag you into the chaos they live in. And every time you accept that invitation, you pay with energy, time, and inner stillness. There are battles that degrade even the winner. You may walk away with the stronger argument, but inside you are already drained, irritated, disturbed. So the Stoic question is simple. Is this worth my peace? Quietly eliminating useless arguments is an act of power. It is choosing not to answer everything. It is understanding that silence is not always retreat. Sometimes it is inner superiority. You do not need to explain yourself to every provocation. You do not need to correct every ignorance. You do not need to participate in every wave of noise. There is deep wisdom in letting some people keep talking alone in front of their own reflection. Not because you think you are better, but because you have understood that your energy is a sacred resource. The third thing that needs to go is constant comparison. Few things corrode the soul more than measuring the value of your existence against someone else's life. It destroys gratitude, weakens character, and makes every achievement feel insufficient. Because there will always be someone who appears more advanced, more recognized, more admired, more stable, more attractive, more put together. And if you turn that into a measure of your own worth, you will never rest. You will spend your life chasing a finish line that keeps moving farther away. Seneca spoke about the danger of living according to the crowd. Not because the crowd is always evil, but because it is easily led by appearances. And comparison feeds on exactly that, appearances. You compare your backstage to someone else's highlight reel. You compare your private pain to another person's edited version of life. You compare the weight you feel to the shine you see on the outside. That is not fairness. That is not clarity. That is self-abandonment. Quietly eliminating comparison requires a radical return to your own path. It requires remembering that your time is yours. Your trials are yours. Your growth has its own pace. Fruit ripens in its proper season. Character does too. The Stoic did not ask whether he was ahead of his neighbor. He asked whether he was better than yesterday in relation to what depends on him. More patient? More upright? More disciplined? More free from fear? That is the only measure that truly matters. The fourth thing that needs to disappear is false urgency. That feeling that everything must happen now, that every delay is a threat, that every pause is wasted time, that rest is almost a sin. The world pushes you into that state all the time. It makes it seem like speed is the same thing as worth. That whoever responds faster, produces faster, grows faster is worth more. But the human soul does not mature in a rush. Urgency may move the body, but it almost always disorders the spirit. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself to act without agitation. That is too deep to ignore. Because many people act, but they act in desperation. They work with anxiety. They love with fear. They decide in panic. And then they wonder why they are so tired. They are tired because they have turned their life into a race against a threat they cannot even name. False urgency makes you live as if you are always late for something, even when you are not. It steals the present and keeps you from seeing that many important things only grow when you stop squeezing time. Quietly eliminating this urgency means recovering your inner pace. It means understanding that yes, there are moments that call for acceleration, but there are also moments when growth happens through invisible consistency, through patient repetition, through quiet construction. What is solid is almost never born in a state of panic. Whoever wants depth must learn to respect the rhythm of things. And that applies to work, relationships, emotional healing, discipline, faith, everything. The fifth thing you need to erase from your life is guilt over what has already happened and can no longer be changed. I am not talking about healthy responsibility, the kind that leads you to recognize a mistake and grow from it. I am talking about the kind of guilt that rots from the inside. The kind that does not correct, only humiliates. The kind that makes you revisit the past like a cruel judge, always finding one more reason to condemn yourself. Many people live this way, trapped by an old decision, a word they should never have spoken, a missed opportunity, a love poorly cared for, an omission that still weighs on them. The Stoics had a very honest relationship with the past. They did not pretend mistakes were not real. But they also did not turn a mistake into an identity. The past was a teacher, not a jailer. You look back to learn, not to build your cell. When you cling to guilt in an unhealthy way, you stop living in the only place where transformation can happen, the present. And that may be one of guilt's quietest blows. It presents itself as conscience, but acts like sabotage. Quietly eliminating this guilt means accepting the hardest and most liberating truth of all. You cannot redo what has already been lived, but you can become someone more honorable because of it. Maybe you really did mess up badly. Maybe it took you far too long to see certain things. Maybe you hurt someone or hurt yourself, or allowed what you never should have allowed. All of that may be true, but continuing to punish yourself forever is not virtue. It is attachment. It is pride turned inward. It is the illusion that suffering over the past will somehow cleanse something. Most of the time, it does not cleanse. It only paralyzes. The sixth thing that needs to go is staying in bonds that drain your strength. And this applies to friendships, romantic relationships, environments, groups, and old cycles. Not everything that is still present is still healthy. There are ties that already serve their purpose, but remain because of fear, habit, or neediness. You feel that every time you leave that person's presence, you need time to recover. You feel you have to dim your light in order to keep the peace. You feel the conversation always circles around gossip, manipulation, competition, complaining, victimhood, control. And even so, you stay because leaving feels too harsh. But Stoicism never taught emotional submission. It taught discernment, and discernment at times requires distance. Not every presence deserves continuity. Not every form of contact is proof of loyalty. There is a kind of attachment born from guilt, not love. A kind of staying that is not nobility, but fear of appearing ungrateful or insensitive. But staying where your soul is diminished is not kindness. It is neglect of yourself. Quietly eliminating draining relationships does not mean announcing disappointments, exposing people, or collecting enemies. It simply means pulling your energy back, reducing access, ending the cycle without the need for a spectacle. The wise person understands that over-explaining is an invitation to exhaustion. Sometimes the best goodbye is consistency. You simply stop offering what costs you your peace, and you move on, without noise, without hatred, without revenge, just with clarity. The seventh thing that needs to be removed is the illusion of absolute control. Perhaps this is one of the deepest roots of human suffering. Wanting to control what others feel, what they think, what they will do. Wanting to control time, outcomes, reactions, the course of life. Wanting to make sure nothing escapes the script. Wanting complete security before taking any step. The problem is that this pursuit is impossible, and the person who insists on it lives at war with reality. Epictetus built much of his philosophy on one central distinction. what is up to you and what is not. It sounds simple, but very few people actually live it, because accepting that something is not up to you requires humility. It requires giving up the fantasy of total sovereignty. It requires understanding that you may act well and still be misunderstood. You may love sincerely and still be left behind. You may prepare deeply and still run into the unexpected. You may do everything with integrity and still not control the outcome. Quietly eliminating the illusion of control is one of the greatest reliefs that exists. It means turning your strength toward where it actually works. Your intention, your choices, your discipline, your posture in the face of what happens. The rest belongs to the flow of life. And fighting that only creates exhaustion. The Stoic did not try to command the world. He trained himself not to be broken by whatever the world might bring. That is real power. Not controlling everything, but remaining whole even when not everything bends to your will. The 8th thing you should erase from your life is excess distraction. Because what destroys you does not always come disguised as pain. Sometimes it comes disguised as constant entertainment, meaningless busyness, beautiful forms of escape. You tell yourself you are only resting, only distracting yourself, only passing the time, but deep down you know something else is going on. You are avoiding an encounter with yourself. You are filling every empty space, so you do not have to hear what your own conscience is trying to say. Seneca observed that many people are miserable not because life is too short, but because they waste life on what does not matter. That insight still feels almost frighteningly current, because it has never been easier to fill an entire day without truly living. You wake up, consume stimulation, answer messages, jump from one task to another, numb yourself with content, drown yourself in noise, and by the end of the day you feel a kind of emptiness you cannot fully explain. That happens because excess distraction does not renew the soul. It only occupies the mind. Quietly eliminating that excess requires discipline over your attention. It requires choosing more carefully what enters through your eyes, your ears, your imagination. It requires enduring certain moments of silence without immediately running to something that helps you forget yourself. Peace is not born from a saturated mind. It is born from an ordered mind. And ordering the mind does not mean filling the schedule. It means restoring priority to what actually shapes character, strengthens the spirit, and gives substance to your days. The 9th thing that needs to be removed is constant complaining. Not the honest expression of real pain, but that habit of turning everything into a burden, everything into an injustice, everything into one more reason to feed bitterness. Constant complaining is addictive because it gives a temporary feeling of release. You speak, vent, criticize, repeat, dramatize. For a few moments it seems like the weight gets lighter, but then it comes back even heavier because a mind trained to complain learns to find fault in everything. And whatever you repeat, you strengthen. Marcus Aurelius had an admirable posture toward this. He did not deny hardship, but he refused to take on the posture of a victim before it. For him, the obstacle could become the path. Pain could become training. An offense could become an opportunity to practice self-mastery. That is not romanticizing suffering. It is refusing to let suffering dictate the entire architecture of your soul. Some people suffer and mature. Others suffer and grow bitter. The difference often lies in the way they speak to themselves about what they are living through. Quietly eliminating complaining means replacing the impulse to lament with the habit of observing. What can be done? What must be accepted? What requires patience? What requires action? What is beyond my reach? That inner shift changes life, because continuous complaining weakens you twice, first by the problem itself, and then by the way you keep reproducing it in your mind. Clarity, on the other hand, restores your presence. And presence always increases your ability to respond. The 10th thing that needs to disappear from your life is self-deception. This may be the most painful elimination of all, because no one likes to admit their own masks. But without that honesty, there is no real growth. Many people suffer not only because of what they live through, but because of what they refuse to see about themselves. They say they are fine when they are falling apart. They say they love when they are dependent. They say they have forgiven when they are still reliving the offense. They say they do not care when, in truth, they live around that very thing. They say they are waiting for the right time when they are simply afraid. The Stoics were rigorous with inner truth, not in the sense of cruelty, but in the sense of sobriety. They knew that the person who lies to himself becomes incapable of governing himself. Because how can you correct what you refuse to admit? How can you treat what you keep disguising? How can you defeat an enemy you insist on calling a friend? Self-deception delays healing, prolongs dependency, preserves illusions, and keeps you tied to old versions of yourself. Quietly eliminating self-deception means having the courage to name things as they are. Without decoration, without drama, without sophisticated excuses. Are you tired? Admit it. Are you still trapped in the past? Admit it. Are you in an empty relationship? Admit it. Are you working without soul only because you are afraid? Admit it. Are you sabotaging yourself? Admit it. The moment truth enters is the moment freedom begins. It does not always come with comfort. In fact, it rarely does. But it comes with direction. And direction is worth more than comfort. The 11th thing you need to erase from your life is attachment to what has already ended. Some people do not live in the present because inwardly they are still negotiating with what is already gone. It may be a relationship. It may be a project. It may be a phase of life in which you felt stronger, more desired, more important, happier. You keep looking back with a secret hope of reopening a door that reality has already closed. And while you do that, you waste the only door that is truly open, the one in front of you right now. Stoicism does not teach coldness. It teaches courageous acceptance. Acceptance is not saying it did not hurt. It is not pretending it did not matter. It is not reducing the value of what was lived. Acceptance is refusing to turn loss into a permanent home. It is honoring what was without becoming a prisoner of it. There is a kind of suffering that is natural when something ends. And there is another kind that is born when you refuse to let it end inside you. That second kind is the most destructive because it endlessly prolongs what life has already concluded. Quietly eliminating attachment to what has ended means stopping the inner conversations that lead nowhere. It means no longer revisiting memories as if you could resurrect a season that has passed. It means allowing an ending to do its work. Not every ending is punishment. Some are liberation. Some are protection. Some are the only possible way for a new version of you to be born. But that only happens when you let go. And letting go is almost always an intimate act, not a public announcement. The 12th thing, perhaps the deepest of all, is the fear of being alone with yourself. Because, in the end, many of the things we have mentioned remain alive precisely to avoid that encounter. The need for approval avoids silence. Distraction avoids silence. Useless arguments avoid silence. Attachment avoids silence. Urgency avoids silence. All of this works like smoke that keeps you from looking directly within. And why is that so frightening? Because in the encounter with yourself, there is nowhere to hide. But that is exactly where Stoicism becomes most beautiful. Because it invites you to make peace with your own inner world. It invites you to sit with your own thoughts, examine impulses, order your emotions, correct your judgments, strengthen your principles. Not so that you become someone cut off from the world, but so that you can return to the world with a center. The person who cannot stand his own company becomes dependent on any kind of noise. But the one who has learned to remain with himself carries a kind of strength that no one notices right away, but everyone can feel. Quietly eliminating that fear means creating space for introspection. Maybe for a few moments each day. Maybe on a walk without distractions. Maybe in a pause before sleep. Maybe in a moment when you simply observe your own mind without running from it. At first, it may be uncomfortable. It may bring up old exhaustion, avoided truths, poorly tended pain. But then something rare begins to emerge, clarity. And with clarity comes serenity. And with serenity comes strength. When you look at all these things together, you begin to notice a pattern. Every one of them pulls you away from yourself. Every one of them weakens your center. Every one of them makes you live outwardly, reacting too much, carrying too much, expecting too much, escaping too much. And the Stoic work was always the opposite of that. It was a return to the essential, a return to what is in your control, a return to sobriety, a return to inner dignity. That is why this cleansing must be silent. Because what is done to impress others almost never transforms you for real. There are people who announce every change. They post every breakup. They explain every decision. They turn every personal adjustment into a performance. But character does not grow on a stage. Character grows in private. It grows when no one is looking. It grows when you silence the urge to respond. When you close a door without drama. When you stop insisting on what has already diminished you. When you reorganize your routine. When you say no to yourself. When you hold a decision steady on ordinary days, without immediate reward, without witnesses, without applause. That is the hardest and noblest part of any transformation. In practical life, this changes everything. At work, for example, it removes the need to prove your worth all the time. You begin to act with more sobriety, more focus, less anxiety for recognition. You do what must be done, improve what is within your reach, accept what you cannot control, and stop wearing yourself out trying to manage impressions. That does not make you apathetic. It makes you steady. And steadiness is a rare gift in a world addicted to agitation. In relationships, this cleansing teaches you to love without abandoning yourself. It teaches you to see the difference between presence and dependency, between loyalty and blind insistence, between patience and silent humiliation. Many people call love what is really fear of being alone. They call understanding what is really tolerance of disrespect. They call hope what has already become denial. The Stoic looks at this with courage. He does not close himself off to affection, but he also does not accept any bond at the cost of his peace. When it comes to anxiety, this shift goes even deeper. Because anxiety is almost always fed by anticipation, comparison, the need for control, excess noise, and fear of disapproval. When you begin to remove those roots, the mind naturally starts to breathe again. Not because life becomes easy, but because your inner world stops operating as if it were in constant war. You learn to return to the present moment. You learn to act on what is possible. You learn to endure what cannot be solved right now. You learn to leave some questions unanswered for a while. And that brings a kind of rest that does not depend on perfection. In personal discipline, the effect is powerful too, because a clear mind decides better. A heart less attached acts better. A conscience less dependent on applause perseveres better. Lack of discipline is often not a lack of ability. It is an excess of inner division. You want to move forward, but you keep feeding habits that weaken you. You want peace, but you keep nurturing noise. You want freedom, but you keep clinging to what drains you. Once you begin to remove these things, your energy starts flowing again with more honesty. And there is something even more important. You begin to respect yourself more. Perhaps that is one of the most beautiful rewards of all quiet elimination. Self-respect is not born only from great achievements. Very often it is born from small private renunciations. From moments when you realize that, for the first time, you did not run after what was devaluing you. You did not answer on impulse. You did not try to convince someone who did not want to understand. You did not compare yourself. You did not dramatize. You did not sell yourself for emotional crumbs. You did not betray yourself. These moments build an inner image of solidity. And when that happens, something inside you begins to settle. Of course, this process is not linear. You do not hear a reflection like this and wake up tomorrow completely free of everything. It does not work that way. On some days, you will feel tempted to return to the old pattern. You will want to over-explain. You will miss what you needed to leave behind. You will catch yourself comparing. You will get irritated by what you should simply ignore. You will want to rush what is still being formed. And that is okay. The Stoic path was never about instant perfection. It was about conscious return. Fell off? Return. Lost your center? Return. Got distracted? Reorient your attention. That is the practice. Marcus Aurelius did this all the time. He did not write because he had completely overcome the human condition. He wrote because he needed reminders. He needed to recenter himself. He needed to return to his axis in the middle of pressure, responsibility, conflict, and weariness. That is deeply comforting because it shows that strength does not lie in never wavering. It lies in developing the ability to return to yourself without abandoning yourself every time you fail. Maybe at this moment, you already know exactly what you need to quietly erase. Maybe a name came to mind. A habit, an insistence, a guilt, an anxiety, a mask, a distraction, a need for approval that has already worn you out. If that happened, do not ignore it. Awareness rarely lights up for no reason. When something becomes clear, a responsibility is born with it. Not the responsibility to fix everything at once, but the responsibility not to pretend you did not see it. Start with what is most obvious. Maybe it is reducing someone's access to your life. Maybe it is stopping yourself from looking at what makes you compare. Maybe it is silencing a pointless conflict. Maybe it is letting go of the fantasy that you can still control everything. Maybe it is simply sitting with yourself for a few moments each day and listening to what has been buried beneath the noise. Do not underestimate these quiet moves. Real transformation almost always begins small, but when it is sustained with firmness, it completely changes the landscape within. And do not expect everyone to understand your inner clearing. Some people benefited from your confusion. Others had grown used to your unlimited availability. Others felt comfortable with your need for approval. When you change, You will inevitably disrupt other people's expectations. That is part of it. The person who lives to preserve everyone else's comfort ends up ruining his own soul. You were not born to be anyone's emotional storage room. You were not born to shrink yourself until you fit inside someone else's insecurity. You were not born to bargain away your peace in exchange for belonging. The Stoic knew that life is far too brief to spend on what lowers the spirit, and that awareness did not make him bitter. It made him selective, more present, more lucid, more grateful, because when you remove the excess, you finally begin to see the essential. The value of a simple day, the dignity of a quiet conscience, the beauty of a life with less noise, the strength of a silent decision held with consistency, the clean joy of no longer needing to prove yourself all the time. In the end, that is what is truly at stake here. Not just eliminating negative things, but making room for a life more aligned with what is true. Room for peace, room for focus, room for more honest relationships, room for discipline, room for presence, room for your own voice, which may have been buried for far too long under the weight of expectations, noise, and attachments that no longer serve you. So quietly erase whatever weakens your soul. Erase the need to be applauded. Erase the urge to answer everything. Erase comparison. Erase empty hurry. Erase guilt that has already taught what it could teach. Erase relationships that drain you. Erase the illusion of control. Erase the distraction that pulls you away from yourself. Erase the complaining that poisons you from within. Erase the lie you tell yourself. Erase your attachment to what has ended. Erase the fear of meeting yourself. Do it with firmness, but without spectacle. With courage, but without theatrical hardness. Like someone putting his inner house in order, knowing that not everything needs to be explained in order to matter. Some of the most important changes in life are not announced. They are lived. They do not make noise. They take root. And one day, almost without noticing, you will realize that something has changed. You will notice that certain things no longer provoke you the same way. That some opinions have lost their power. That some silences have become lighter. That some absences no longer hurt as they once did. That you stopped running toward the places where you used to humiliate yourself. That you learned to remain more whole in your own company. That peace stopped being a distant ideal and began to become a way of walking through life. That is the sign that the cleansing has started to bear fruit. Because in the end, true strength is not found in conquering the whole world. It is found in refusing to let what is small, petty, shallow, and chaotic rule your inner life. True freedom is not doing everything you want. It is not being dragged around by everything you feel. And true peace is not born when life becomes perfect. It is born when your soul stops hosting what should no longer be there. As a Stoic sage might say, even if in different words, be careful about what you allow to live inside you, because it is there, and not out in the world, that the destiny of your spirit is decided. And before you go, subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this, more Stoic wisdom, more clarity, and more strength for everyday life. And leave a comment below telling me where you're watching from. I always love seeing how far these ideas travel, and it means a lot to know which part of the world you're listening from.